Thank you, Charles. Good day, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I will talk about the history, the brief and the longer past of Suriname. I will take you on a journey through the history of Suriname, one of the three Guyanas, as you can see on the map, on the northern coast of South America. Suriname is a country with a rich but a complex history, a history of resilience and change. We will talk about the social and economic development throughout the centuries, the influence of the plantations and slavery, the formation of the multi-ethnic state, and the road to independence from the Netherlands in 1975. And I will tell you what happened after the independence. There was a military coup and summary executions took place. Finally, we will look at the political developments and how the recent oil discoveries may change or will change the country after 2021. Next slide, please. I had the pleasure of experiencing Surinamese history over the past 60 years. First, as the son of a tropical forester who worked to preserve the rainforest, and after that, as a student at school. Our family returned to the Netherlands before the independence in 1975, where I became a journalist. And in that function, I often traveled to Suriname to cover the important events for the Dutch media. Next slide, please. In 2009, I settled back in Paramaribo, this time as a correspondent for Dutch public broadcasting. Since my retirement in 2019, I have been doing consultancy work from Paramaribo for various international clients. Next slide, please. I grew up in one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. In my youth, Suriname had a population of 300,000, only 300,000, consisting of more than 10 ethnicities. Sometimes my father would take us with him for his work to the interior. And then we were in a boat passing Amerindian villages along the rivers. Next slide, please. The Amerindians are the original inhabitants of the country who have lived there since 10,000 years before Christ. When the Europeans thought around the year 1600 that the land of gold, El Dorado, might be in Suriname, the country became interesting to them, and the Amerindians were driven back further into the interior. Other villages that we passed were inhabited by Maroons. The next slide, please. The Maroons are direct descendants of the escaped slaves. Their ancestors chose the hard life in freedom in the tropical rainforest over the hard life in captivity on the plantations. Next slide, please. The escaped slaves were hunted down and the punishments were severe if they were caught. Worldwide, there was a growing realization that slavery had to end, and in 1863, slavery was abolished in Suriname as well. Next, please. But the plantations had to continue to be cultivated, and so the Dutch brought the first Chinese, Javanese, and Hindustani people, Hindustani from India. They worked in relative freedom, a freedom that also gave them the opportunity in the following decades to start farming or to do other work. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, there were groups of Jews who had fled the Spanish and Portuguese persecution of Jews, and there were Lebanese who sought a better future than the one that their own country had to offer at that time. And the Lebanese still control a part of the middle class in Paramaribo. And the indigenous people and Maroons still live in the interior. In many ways, Suriname has not changed that much since my youth. Even though the population has doubled in the meantime, it's about 600,000 now, the diversity of ethnicities has increased rather than decreased. People come to Suriname to try their luck, particularly from Brazil, Venezuela, and Cuba. Also from Haiti, by the way. This diversity creates cultural richness, but also political and economic inequalities. Next slide, please. In the 20th century, the awareness of self-government grew. The economic dependence on the Netherlands and the limited political autonomy led to a growing call for independence, and Suriname finally gained its independence on the 25th of November in 1975. So that's almost 50 years ago today. Next, please. In the first decades after independence, Suriname didn't fare well. The country struggled with economic and political instability, and in 1980, a military coup took place under the leadership of Desi Bouterse. You can see him on this picture with the other sergeants who took part in the coup. Desi Bouterse, remember his name, you will hear his name much more often in this webinar. Desi Bouterse is the third one from the right on this picture with the beard. Well, more have beards, but the third one from the right is Desi Bouterse. A tragic low point in Surinamese history came in 1982. That was 2 years after the military coup, when 15 prominent opponents of the regime were arrested without trial and they were executed. This traumatic event went down in history as the December murders. And on this picture, you can see the 15 people who were killed. The December murders left their mark on the history of the following decades because the community is so small, almost every Surinamese knew one of the victims or even had family members among them. Just as many Surinamese knew one of the coup plotters, one of the military, and as a result, society became paralyzed with fear. The country ended up in international isolation and the military sought refuge in the drug trade. Suriname became an important hub for the Colombian cocaine, destined mainly for Europe, but also to other countries. The informal money circuit grew enormously and continues to exist to today. After international pressure and economic decline, democracy was restored in 1987. Desi Bouterse founded a political party, but barely obtained any votes in his first election in 1987. Next slide, please. Suriname's economy remained dependent on raw materials such as bauxite, as you can see here, gold, and later oil. Fluctuating prices and poor governance prevented sustainable growth. And meanwhile, the trial against those guilty of the December murders had also begun. In addition to being the leader of the opposition, Bouterse was now also the prime suspect in this historic case. The trial dragged on for 16 years after it began until a verdict was reached. Next, please. This is Bouterse, who, despite everything in 2010, became he was in 2010 he was the military coup leader, convicted drug trafficker, and suspected murderer. He became the elected president of Suriname. His charisma and his multi-ethnic character, the multi-ethnic character of his National Democratic Party, were important factors in his popularity, and also because the other political parties didn't restore economy for the people. It was also a reason why the people voted for another party, and Bouterse was the most popular in 2010. But again, he saddled the country with another shaky economy. He incurred enormous debts, about $2.5 billion US, and another $1.5 billion in overdue payments. Meanwhile, the December murders trials, which has lasted 16 years, was coming to an end. In December 2023, Bouterse was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was not immediately detained and he fled. And 1 year later, on Christmas Eve 2024, that's about 3 months ago, his remains were delivered to his home by unknown persons, as his wife said. The official cause of death, cirrhosis of the liver due to excessive alcohol consumption. Next, please. In 2020, the Bouterse government was voted out of office and the people elected President Santokhi, John Santokhi, as head of the government. He inherited the country after Bouterse with a deficit of $4 billion. Immediately after taking office, in 2020, the new president followed a strict economic recovery program led by the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The debts were restructured and the IMF program was successfully completed last month. That the country is on the right macroeconomic track, that's what we can say, and that is also what the IMF says. Inflation is decreasing and debt repayment is on schedule. This is essential, but the population has not yet noticed much of it and is dissatisfied with the policies of President Santokhi and his government. So the big question will be whether Santokhi's party will win again in the elections of next May, 25th of May. It is an enormous challenge for any Surinamese government to get the country's economy in order, as also because a significant part of the economy revolves around the drug and illegal gold trade. Next, please. Also under Santokhi's leadership, Santokhi is a former police officer, but even under his leadership, the country is finding it is difficult to combat the drug trade. Large drug seizures, we're talking about tons of cocaine, are made on a regular basis. Last year, 8,000 kilograms were seized by the Spanish police. Next slide, please. Another important part of the country's informal economy is related to small-scale and almost always illegal gold mining. It is estimated that between 20,000 and 30,000 people depend on this small-scale mining. Other estimates indicate that approximately half of all Surinamese gold is mined annually. It comes from the small-scale mining. That's another estimation. Apart from the environmental pollution that it causes, hardly any royalties are paid to the state. And you can imagine that this large-scale drug trade, as well as the illegal gold mining, generate hundreds of millions of unofficial US dollars in the small Surinamese economy. According to banking sources, the informal money circuit still accounts for between 35 and 40% of the total economy. 35 and 40% of the total economy. So that's almost half the informal circuit. In fact, I was surprised when an IMF official told me a few years ago that the luxurious street scene in Paramaribo in Suriname does not match the poor figures of the country's economy. I don't know how it's possible, he said. And well, I knew, and I think that he should have known as well, that there is a second very important economy in Suriname. Next slide, please. After 2028, oil extraction may bring about a major economic transformation. The discoveries off the coast offer opportunities for enormous revenues, but also risks. Many countries with oil reserves have to deal with corruption, inequality, and dependence on oil as their only economic pillar. The question is, will Suriname do things differently? My personal vision for the future is, if Suriname uses its oil revenues wisely, it can invest in infrastructure, education, sustainable energy sources to promote the diversification of the economy. Political stability and good governance will be crucial. There is an opportunity to build a more prosperous and stable Suriname, but that requires leadership and vision. Next slide, please. Suriname has come a long way from colonial oppression, slavery, and political instability to a country with unprecedented economic opportunities. The question remains whether the country will be able to utilize these opportunities and build a sustainable future. The results of the upcoming election on the 25th of May will play a crucial role in Suriname's future. Thank you very much for your attention. I am open for your questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Willem Bloem. I would like to give you an update on what's been happening in the oil and gas industry in Suriname. And really, that goes back to late 2019 when Apache Corporation discovered the Maka oil and gas discovery, which has actually sparked a development that has led to the Harmen Boerboom project. Actually partnered up with Apache and have been working on appraisal of the oil discoveries. 4 discoveries were made by Apache originally, and then Total Energies took over, and they managed to get to a final investment decision last October on a $12 billion offshore oil development, with first oil expected in 2028, so 3 years from now. Besides that, there is another development ongoing. There's another appraisal project where several discoveries were made by Petronas in an adjacent block that's gassy with oil. So another major final investment decision will be expected there within the coming years as well. Unlike Guyana, which is relatively gassy oil, Suriname has a very good deal of gas potential, gas reserves associated with the oil, and some of it free gas. The initial focus will be on developing the oil reserves because that's quicker and relatively more straightforward. But the future will definitely involve the monetization, the development and production and sale of gas reserves as well. And that should really develop towards local and export markets. The gas resources will be. And so, so with 50 years of almost 50 years of independence, rising investments in the country, and economic reforms are in progress, and we have 2025 elections coming up, like Harmen said, in May the 25th of this year. So just a quick look at the oil and gas, a little bit more detail on the oil and gas overview. We go to the next slide, please. This is actually better explained with the next slide, which shows a little map that puts it a little bit more into perspective. Oh, my numbers have dropped out. So first of all, the FID, like I said, 1st of October 24, FID, final investment decision, was announced in Block 58 by Total. At the same time, we had slightly earlier last year, we had successful exploration award in what we call the Demerara Deep Water Licensing Round. It's slightly deeper water. The Harmen Boerboom development is in 400 to 1200 meters water depth. Demerara is slightly deeper. And so these are quite challenging exploration wells. At the same time, slightly earlier actually, there was a shallow water offshore round, where several awards have been made. The second one has one award to PetroChina. The first one had awards to Total, Chevron, and Shell. And so with Block 52, that's the next big thing that's ongoing. There have been oil discoveries as well as a gas appraisal, a gas discovery, and further appraisal, meaning one does a well test and looks at the extent of the reservoir. Also, on Block 52, Staatsolie, the national oil company of Suriname, which I hadn't yet mentioned, Staatsolie is the national oil company, has been producing oil and gas onshore, in fact, oil only onshore in Saramacca, and that oil is being used to feed a local refinery. A very interesting, very successful development over the years. Staatsolie has signed a letter of intent with Petronas for gas development of Block 52, including a floating LNG concept. So that's very promising. That will enable the export of gas to international markets, and those markets are very, very buoyant at the moment. At the same time, also hopefully some of that gas can be used from the offshore basin to help develop local economy and local development. Also, of course, if we look across the border in Guyana, there's been a lot of activity in the Stabroek block with ExxonMobil as the operator. They have several gas discoveries just across the border with the maritime border with Suriname. So there might be opportunity for joint developments there, which is being discussed. In Guyana, also positive about development of LNG, liquefied natural gas, and a party is being appointed to study that. So if you go to the next slide, that shows the map. The numbers, unfortunately, have dropped off. But right in the center, where you see those orange blobs, that is the Block 58 Total block where the FID has been taken. And it's very interesting to see that that massive investment has been announced. And since October, things have really gone into a higher pace of development with the arrival of several contracting firms that will work with Total to develop these fields. And I have a little slide about what that looks like a little later. So that is in fact, the summary of the developments as we see them at the moment. There will be more exploration activity later this year with several operators drilling new exploration wells. So that is separate. Exploration is separate from the ongoing development by Total and the appraisal activities in Block 52 by Petronas. I can't point that to you now, but it's in the middle of the block, or in the middle of the graphic. Okay, so next slide, please. So like I said, large-scale offshore oil development, final investment decision taken. This 12 billion project targets the Sapakara and Krabdagu oil fields. It's 150 kilometers offshore, so that's quite a long way. Water depths vary because it's a sloping bathymetry. It's a sloping sea bottom. I have a slide on that later. Recoverable reserves in the order of 750 million barrels of oil, so it's very, very large, world scale. And then the production first phase is planned for 2028. Now, this will develop the Sapakara and Krabdagu field, but that's not all that exists in this block. There were previous discoveries drilled that are still in the pipeline, and I'm assuming that Total is looking with their partners at developing those as well at a later phase. But for now, all the focus is really on getting that first production going by 2028 with the floating production, storage, and offloading unit. I have a graphic of that later on, but effectively, it's a very large ship that produces oil, compresses the gas, and re-injects it into the reservoir. Total has a 50% operating stake with Apache Corporation, my prior employer, as a partner, also 50%, but the national oil company, Staatsolie, has an option to acquire 20% equity in the project, and they are actually going through financing rounds for that now. It's an environmentally efficient design, incorporating technology to minimize emissions. That's very important. There will be no routine flaring and re-injection, like I said, of all the associated gas. And associated gas is gas that comes up with the oil because it's in solution. And as you make it atmospheric to put it into a tanker, that gas comes out. So that gas is recompressed and injected into the reservoir. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yep. So this is the location. And what you see, those wiggly spaghetti lines in the detailed graph, those are all the subsea lines. And if we go to the next slide, you can see what that looks like broadly in an image where you see the production ship sitting there top of the middle. That's in 400 meters water depth. The shallowest wells are in what we call shallow waters, about 80 to 100 meters water depth. But the deep water is much deeper, up to 1,200 meters. You see the Krabdagu wells there at the bottom, and towards the right you see the Sapakara. So this is actually a very large area that would basically cover the distance between Paramaribo and the big Brokopondo Lake in the interior. So it's a very, very large project, and hence also the significant costs. Next slide, please. The natural gas, of course, we haven't forgotten about the fact that there is also gas reserves here. I had the great pleasure of leading a study group for the government of Suriname to look at the possible uses of natural gas and what it could do to benefit the country. First and foremost, gas could serve as a cleaner bridge between fossil fuels and renewables. We do have significant renewables in Suriname. It's about 50% of our power generation that comes from a hydro dam, the Brokopondo Lake and Afobaka power plant that produces, like I said, about half of the electricity demand, but the rest is produced using thermal power plants and that runs on liquid fuels. So there's a potential there to lower the carbon footprint there using natural gas. But of course, you need to take it from the deep waters offshore to the land where those thermal power stations are. But gas can give you a lot of flexibility. It can be integrated with the hydropower, but also with solar and biomass. Both of those are being trialed. Solar is already being developed, and biomass is being trialed. There are other renewables being looked at as well. But of course, the overall objective is to support the continuous, reliable supply of energy whilst minimizing emissions. And also dealing with the intermittency that's naturally bound with sources like solar and possible wind. So the addition of a gas supply would enable a hybrid energy system, but of course we need quite a lot of investment in that. And it is also fair to say that the amount of experience in country would need to really grow to be able to tackle these challenges in the future. So next slide, please. So natural gas drives the economic development and poverty reduction. There is a wide recognition in the country that further investment is needed in particularly healthcare and education. There's a lot of initiatives ongoing to expand the educational system at all levels in the country, but it takes a long time to build, of course. Well, at the same time, the train has left the station. There's a big energy development going on, and there is a need for staff to manage all of that. Total Energies estimated about $1 billion of that 12 billion overall capex, capital expenditure, will be invested in the local economy. So that's very significant, and that needs people. Money needs people to make it work. So the focus is really on educating local content and providing jobs for the Surinamese people. Of course, foreigners will be required as well with that. So there's a big opportunity there. I'm running a little out of time, and I really wanted to mention the Green Development Strategy. So if you go ahead, one slide, another slide. Yeah, so this has actually come straight from the Ministry of Spatial Planning and the Environment, a very ambitious ministry in Suriname that has come up with a Green Development Strategy, which functions as an overall part of the development vision for the country. Now, I say that very firmly. There is still a lot of debate on what that future vision will be, but it's very high on people's minds, and it's indeed very important that it is being stipulated and implemented. And that is why it is so interesting just to look at the elections and to see what will come out of that process and how it will tackle some of these visionary documents, such as the Green Development Strategy. But by 2050, so you can see it there, Suriname aspires to be a leading example of sustainable development. Not quite where we are right now, but definitely a vision that one wants to embody. So with diversified, resilient, and inclusive economy, and particularly the diversification is important. One must take into account that the very large investment of $12 billion into an energy system will have the potential to really skew the economy. And so at the same time, there is increasing investment and increasing attention being paid to other sectors in the industry so that they will not get strangled and will get a carbon curse in the country. And those sectors will be tourism, agriculture, and there's quite a lot of other examples. Far too much to go into right now, but I just wanted to flag this. And there actually in your handouts, there are some backup slides. There's probably too much detail to go to right now. But the overall objective here is to foster innovative growth and sustainable prosperity for all. Suriname is still relatively underdeveloped. And with that, I mean the global domestic product per capita is relatively low. But really, the potential for that to grow significantly, as we have seen in neighboring Guyana, is enormous. And it is really upon the next government to harness that and to make sure that that overall education, healthcare, and infrastructure will be developed. So I have a few more slides, but I won't dwell on it right now. There's certainly space for more dialogue in the Q&A. Now, this one gives you a quick, the Green Development Strategy. You see here just a snapshot of what has been looked at by a group of consultants. I was not part of this myself, but I really think it's an excellent piece of work. It's publicly available, so please have a look at that. And with that, I'd like to conclude and hand over to Iwan.
Thank you, Willem. Good morning, everybody. My name is Iwan Brave, or as you wish, Iwan Brave. I will give you a presentation of the political process in Suriname and its key players. We will talk about the structure of the government, the major political parties and their influence, and about the role of the civil society, businesses, and external actors, and also shortly about the recent policy that changes impacting governance and investment. Well, the first slide indeed, it's about the structure of the government. It's three elements: the National Assembly, or the Parliament. We say Dutch, the Nationale Assemblée. It's literally our DNA. There's the President as the head of state and the government, and the Vice President, and that should be written in the councils of ministers. But before we go in depth about these three elements, the question is, do we in Suriname have a parliamentary or presidential system? Well, that depends how you look at it. Suriname has a parliamentary system with presidential characteristics. Officially, it's a parliamentary system because the president is elected by the parliament and not directly by the people. At the same time, Suriname also has a presidential, as I said, elements, because the president is both head of the state and has the government, similar to a presidential system. He appoints and dismisses the ministers without being accountable to the parliament. Of course, he has to explain some things there. So we could say it's like a hybrid form. And what also is interesting, the Constitution does not even provide impeachment procedures for the president and the vice president to send them home. So, yeah, it's in that case, after the president is elected, we are stuck with a presidential system, you could say. The president also can freely establish presidential working groups at will. And he is elected by a 2/3 majority in the parliament, as the constitutional demands. And if no candidate secures this majority after 2 rounds, the election process will move to the United People Assembly, which consists of all members of the parliament. There are 51 members, but also the members of the district councils. There's about like 700 plus, and the members of the research councils. And that's together about nearly 900 members. And then a simple majority will be sufficient to elect the president and the vice president. So the next slide, please. The first element of the government structure is the National Assembly, the DNA. It exists, it counts 51 members, and they are elected by the principle of one man, one vote. The DNA plays a central role according to legislation, and it oversees also the government. And simple decisions or laws are made by, decisions and laws are taken by a simple majority. But if it's about constitutional changes, you need 2/3 of the votes. As you can see there, at the right side, that's the chairman of the assembly, Mr. Maurice Bay, and he's a member of the ABOP party, and ABOP stands for General Liberation and Development Party. We'll go also in depth about these parties, and ABOP is one of the 4 major players. Political players in Suriname. Next slide. There we have the president. As said, he is both head of the state and of the government, and he's leading in the policy, and he represents Suriname also internationally. And he is chosen for a 5-year term. And of course, you have to be plus 30, Sudanese nationality, and at least you have to be a resident for 6 years. And the current president, as you see here, is Mr. Chandrike Persat Santokhi. We also say it briefly, Chan Santokhi. And he is also the party leader and the chairman of the VHP, and that stands for the Progressive Reform Party. And this is the biggest party at the moment in the parliament. But we'll talk about that later. Next slide. They have the vice president and the council of ministers. Although the ministers are appointed by the president, but the vice president, he chairs the council of ministers. And in absence of the president, he will act as the president. Okay, as you see, so the government includes the president, the vice president, and the council of ministers. And the current vice president is Ronnie Brunswijk, and he's also party leader and chairman of the ABOP, the party I just mentioned ago. And there's Mr. Ronnie Brunswijk. Next slide. And the four major political parties in Suriname are the Progressive Reform Party, we say Vooruitstrevende Hervormingspartij, the VHP, historically very influential and a strong Indo-Surinamese support, the descendants from the indentured laborers. This party was founded somewhere in the mid-40s of the last century, and that is also counts also for the National Party of Suriname, the NPS. Historical also a very influential, but with a strong Creole support. And then we have the National Democratic Party, which was mentioned as the party of Mr. Bouterse, the NDP, relatively young, non-ethnic, that's what they claim, but still with a large Creole following. And as we have said before, then we have also the General Liberation and Development Party, de Algemene Beveiligings- en Ontwikkelingspartij, the ABOP, also relatively young and supported by the Maroon community. And it's a lot of, that's mainly inhabitants from the interior in Suriname. Next slide. Well, we go in depth. This is, as we said, the four main players, the Progressive Reform Party, the VHP, at the moment the biggest party, 20 of the 51 seats they have in the parliament. And as I said, the party leader is Mr. Chan Santokhi, that's our president, and he is party leader since 2011. And a long historical influence, and as I said, a strong Indo-Surinamese support. It's also called the Orange Party, as you see as the color. Next slide. And then we have the National Party of Suriname, the NPS, also founded somewhere in mid-40s of the last century. And the party leader is Mr. Gregory Rusland. You can see him on the right side. We call it the Green Party, and historical, very influential, and a strong Creole support. But as you see, the NPS has only 3 seats of the 51 seats, but still it's a major player. Before we had a district-based elections system, and that's why it happened that the NPS had only 3 seats. But we won't go into that. But from this year, it will be a nation-based election system, and every vote has the same value now. So that means that if in a new system, the NPS would have about now 9 seats, but now they have 3. Okay, and then we have the National Democratic Party, the NDP. Its party leader is Jennifer Geerling Simons since this year. Relatively young party, as I said, non-ethnic, but with a large Creole following. As we see, the party leaders are very glued to their chairman seat, but Mevrouw Simons is new, but it becomes Mr. Bouterse. This party was founded in 1987 after the democracy was restored. But in 1996, Bouterse became chairman, and since then he has been re-elected. And after his conviction, as Harmen mentioned, and when he got hiding, they had made him honorary chairman. And that's why Mevrouw Simons is now the party leader and chairman. Otherwise, it would be still Mr. Bouterse. So, and the fourth player is the General Liberation and Development Party, the ABOP, founded in 1990. And the ABOP has 9 seats of the 51 seats in the parliament, but they had only 24,000 votes last time, and the MPS had 34,000 votes, and they have only 3 seats, but the ABOP has now 9 seats, and that had to do with what they call the chief seats in the districts, because of the district where they had not too many inhabitants. That's why it was easy to get those seats in the districts. By example, in Paramaribo, you need 2,000 votes to get a seat, and in the district, some of the districts only 950 votes. But as I said, from the next election, this will be changed, and every vote has the same value, and then it will be very hard for ABOP to grow, and the MPS probably will gain more seats. But still, the ABOP think they will gain 100,000 votes this year. It's all podium talk, but we will see what will happen. Next slide. So we're going to talk about the role of civil society, the business and external actors. Moment, please. Yes, the civic political engagement is especially found at the level of the district councils and the resort councils here in Suriname. And we have also NGOs, so you can say that the political engagement or participation of the society in Suriname is pretty well. And yes, you have also active citizens, they participate to this. And what also shapes Suriname identity is that we have an ethnical diversity, and our slogan is also a mantra, you should say, unity in diversity. So we're a peaceful society. Political-wise, there are some struggles, but at the end, Suriname is a good example for how many ethnic people can live with each other, but it must improve, of course. And what the key industries in Suriname are oil, gold, agriculture, and also tourism. But in this specific case, ecotourism is as a niche market. We won't have a lot of tourists, millions, but Suriname can distinguish itself as an ecotourism country. And the small and middle enterprises, they drive a lot of employment and innovation, but they do need international partnerships to reach that. And the key investors, they come from China, France, USA, and the Netherlands, especially now with France, with the final investigation of Total Energy. France is a big investor now in Suriname. China, that is tradition for the last decades. The Netherlands, there's also tied because of the history with the Netherlands. We speak the same language. By example, a lot of outsourcing call centers A lot of call center services from the Netherlands are outsourced to Suriname. And I think about 4,000 people, especially young people, have employment in this sector. Next slide. There we are. Yes, there are some policy reforms. They focus really on economic diversification to reduce the reliance on natural resources and also to improve infrastructure in transport and energy. But that's what we say for decades. The economic diversification must be very important for Suriname to reduce the reliance on natural resources. But it's more said than that is done. In the coming 10 years, it will be very important if Suriname will use the oil money to diverse its economy. We will see if it will be good or will be also the victim of the oil curse. Yes, and the investment climate is improving through simplified foreign investment incentives and regulations. And there's a strong focus on sustainability with renewable energy and eco projects and international financial collaboration for development. So we can go to the conclusion. The Suriname's governance has a clear structure. The quality has to improve also, but we are going, and it will depend what will happen the coming 5 years again. Will we keep growing or will we have set again as had happened the last 4 decades? And the political parties, they are reflecting historical and ethnic diversity, while economic policies focus on growth and sustainability. That was my presentation. I hope it was clear enough.
Thank you, Iwan.
You're welcome.
Hi, I am George. Oh, sorry. Can I? Thank you. Hi, I am George Aalstein. And thank you, Iwan. You said a lot of stuff that I was gonna say as well. So I'm gonna keep it short. I'm George Aalstein, born and raised in Suriname for the majority of the time. Raised in Suriname. Moved to Europe to work and study, came back and became an entrepreneur, which was a wonderful journey. And you know, for an entrepreneur, it's always important that the political situation is very stable. This is a thing in Suriname that has always been a problem. But we try to do our best, and we know that we're going in a great direction. That is the first statement and the only statement I wanted to make today. Now we'll start with my presentation. The general elections of Suriname. Like I said, Iwan has spoken about a lot I was planning on saying, but I'll go through it briefly. The general elections of Suriname. Suriname's elections are scheduled to hold on the 25th of May of this year. The president stated this officially in the National Assembly on the 1st of October from the last year. Following the 22 Constitutional Court ruling, Suriname adopted a one man, one vote system, which is great because it has been different for many years, which made it a not complete democratic situation. Because in the old days, the smaller the population in a district, the heavier the vote would count. So that would mean that the vote of a person living in a population that is small within a district would vote. His vote could be sometimes 10 to 20 times heavier than somebody living in a more populated district. That has been changed, and the one man, one vote situation will change the political scene in Suriname completely. hopefully, and I think so, for the best. The preparations are on a roll. We are there are political movements created all over the country. All political parties are very active in showing their face, telling their story, and trying to collect as many followers as possible. The Surinamese government, as always, plans to invite international observers to ensure the elections are conducted fair and transparently. This is very important for Suriname because fraud and corruption is all over the place. These elections are anticipated to be so significant, marking the first under the new electoral system. That's one. And of course, the fact that oil and gas has become a major key player or role player in the economic situation, the coming economic situation of this country. So the international observers are even more important with these elections. Next slide, please. The electoral process and key roles. Iwan has explained this, I think, completely, but I will go through it again. Parliamentary elections, voters will elect members of the National Assembly, which consists of 51 seats. The Assembly is unicameral and members serve a 5-year term. Presidential elections. Following parliamentary elections, of course, the president is elected indirectly by the National Assembly for a term of 5 years. This process emphasizes very much coalition building because usually no single party secures an absolute majority. And within the coalition building, there will be a lot of politics going on. The coalition building starts even long before the elections. It's a poker kind of playing game. It's business deals are made. It's a very, very active economic thing going on. Which party could support whom, and what will be the results when we win? Who will get this ministry and who will get the other ministry? All these things are spoken up front and dealt with up front. And when the elections finally come and everything is done, they are off to business. Next slide, please. I will skip this one because this Iwan has completely spoken about this. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah. Next one. Thank you. While comprehensive public opinion polls are limited, there is a general sentiment favoring change, particularly due to the concerns about corruption and economic challenges. The former government was accused of a lot of corruption, and so is this government. The only difference is that this government has somewhat tried their best to guide certain economic situations into structures, and it will take time for us to see that total effect. And the majority of the population does not feel that way or understand that because they are hungry. They are in a very economic bad situation, so they don't have very much time to wait on the changes that are already made. This will influence the voters very much. and it will definitely influence them in such a fashion that they might choose for wrong situations. Let's hope not. But when people are hungry, the only solution they see is the food they need to eat, and that is, of course, a logic thing. Voters are expected to prioritize economic development, effective governance, and the strategic management of the country's emerging oil revenues. So, with keeping all these things in mind, the outcome of the elections could be so different than expected that it might cause bigger economic problems. But that is a study for us to see just now. Next, coalition governments, the potential election scenarios. Coalition governments, that's number one. Given the fragmented political landscape, coalition governments are likely. The nature will significantly influence policy directions, especially concerning economic reform and foreign relations. The presidential transitions. If the VHP leads the next government, Chandrika Prasad Santokhi is the potential presidential candidate. His administration would probably focus on anti-corruption measures and economic revitalization. Election process. After parliamentary elections, the National Assembly elects the president. This indirect system requires extensive negotiation and alliances, as no single party typically achieves the majority. So then we come back to the same point. There's going to be a lot of wheeling and dealing going on before the alliances are completely made. And like I said, they have started negotiations long before the elections. Friends with friends, friends with enemies. Whatever will rub the situation the right way will work for them. So the outcome can be as we expected, but the outcome could be very outrageous as well. Next. Historical precedents and expected challenges. Like we said, Daisy Bouterse served from 2010 till 2020 and died in December last. He faced criticism for corruption and economic mismanagement during his tenure. His death removes a significant figure from Suriname's political scene, and the NDP must now select new leadership to continue its political agenda. Ms. Simons is one of the presidential candidates. We also have Michael Adin. In a situation like this, it is obvious that within the party there are some struggles going on, and we will see how that works out. For the VHP, we know that Chandrika Prasad Santokhi will be the president if they win. The incoming administration will need to address the ongoing challenges in governance, focusing and restoring public trust, implementing effective reforms, and effectively fighting corruption to stabilize the economy. Which means that whoever wins, however the alliances will be, whoever will be president, the coming term will be a very difficult one, because the government of Bouterse left and a very distorted country behind. The government as we speak now made many promises and held very little of them. So the distortion goes on. The new government will have so many difficult distorted situations to deal with that it will be an extreme challenge for them. Next. Yeah, the potential candidates, Chandrika Prasad Santokhi for the VHP. Former Justice Minister will emphasize on sustainable economic development and anti-corruption reforms. NDP leadership, following the passing of the NDP, the former president of the NDP is expected to nominate a new candidate. It could be Simmons or it could be Adin. While the new leadership may continue Bouterse policies, there could be a shift in how the party appeals to the voters, which is a very, very important thing to keep in mind for the NDP. Bouterse was a very charismatic leader and had a lot of followers. Now the situation will definitely be different. Next. Impact of the elections on Suriname's economic and foreign policy. Economic policy. The election outcome will determine the approach to managing newfound our resources and revenues, with debates likely over fiscal responsibility, investment, infrastructure, and social programs. Foreign policies. Suriname's foreign policies may change depending on the elected administration, balancing relations between CARICOM countries, France, the Netherlands, China, the US, neighboring South American nations, and more. So once again, the alliances that will follow these elections will decide both of these points: the economic policy and the foreign policy. The moment the elections are done, we will know for sure what will be going on. Let's hope once again that the alliances that are formed will make the right decisions concerning the country and the direction we want to go in with the oil and gas situation and etc. Next. Oh, yeah, that was it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We now have a number of questions, quite a few of them, so we'll try and rattle through as many as possible. Would anyone like to comment on the border dispute between French Guiana and Guyana, on the Guyana and French Guiana territorial disputes?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. Yeah. The question was
on the border disputes between Suriname with Guyana and Suriname with French Guiana.
Oh yeah, the border dispute with Suriname and Guyana is a dispute that is still going on. It's an official dispute. So there isn't very much to say than that the higher court will decide what will happen. And it's an official dispute that is still going on. Concerning French Guyana, there isn't a dispute anymore.
Okay. Question here about what about Block 53? Willem, do you want to answer that? You're on mute at the moment. There you are.
Yes, Block 53, as it used to be, has largely been relinquished, which means it's been given back to the state, except for the carve-out of the Baja discovery. And the Baja discovery was made by Apache and its partners Petronas and Cepsa in 2022. So that is a carve-out. It's a discovery. And at the moment, the parties are looking at development plans in the context of the nearby developments. And so it's actually placed pretty much in between the discoveries that Total are developing, Sapakara, the Krabdagu, as well as also not too far away from the Petronas discoveries in Block 52. That is an outstanding matter, and really, I can only share with you what is in the public domain. This is also what I know because I left that company 2 years ago. But it's definitely Baja discovery is carved out still with the existing partnership Apache, Petronas, Cepsa, whereas the remainder of that larger block is open acreage, so it's given back to the government. I hope that answers your question, Serge.
Okay, there's an interesting question here from Sacha, who I know. He says, any idea to work with Bitcoin miners to potentially optimize the grid and general energy consumption? So using hydropower for Bitcoin mining. Anyone know anything about that?
No.
Well, I know a little bit about it, but it's just from what I hear. Bitcoin mining is already being pursued on an individual level by small-scale players, and it was actually very popular up until the abolition of electricity subsidies. What's happened was electricity prices were very low because of a subsidy that was in place. This is actually one of the demands of the IMF for the debt renegotiations, that those subsidies were strongly reduced or abolished altogether, which saw immediate rises in the prices of fuels, so gasoline and diesel, but also of the power system. There's still a level of subsidy present, but particularly larger users pay a larger tariff than they used to, which means that it's not as profitable anymore as it used to be. I'm not aware of large-scale players in that space, but I do know that some people do that and have mining plants in their homes. But I'm not sure if there's anything on a bigger scale. Maybe someone else can fill in on that.
Okay. There's a question here about gas to shore project in Guyana. Looks as if it's going ahead. Is Suriname looking to share these facilities or consider its own LNG development?
Yeah, that's probably another one for me, although it's very hard to give a firm answer on that because there's so many outstanding factors. Integrated natural gas developments are inherently very complex, particularly commercially. It's technically complex, but commercially even more so. So very often to predict what happens with LNG or gas in general is more of a commercial dilemma than it is technical. Technically, everything's possible. Commercially, it's obviously a lot more complicated because what you need to take into account is a very muddy and very low relief shoreline. Low relief means it gets deeper very, very slowly when you get to the coast. And that's a muddy, mangrove-covered coastline. It's not a pretty sandy beach, but it's not that simple. It's possible, of course, but it's not that cheap to lay pipelines through that. That's one situation. Of course, if you build onshore, you have enormous scale. The other thing that you need to take into account is when you look at the map is the geographical distance between all these discoveries. I mean, it's 150 kilometers offshore, which is already considerable. I think in Guyana, the Liza or the Stabroek license, but the Liza field is some 200 kilometers from the coast. And yes, they are building a gas-to-shore pipeline. I think it's largely ready. With that come NGL production, LPG bottling, and so forth. So a lot of local benefit arise from that. I think in Suriname, we're quite so ready to predict what's going to happen there. First of all, it is really down to the PSC contractors to come up with development proposals, and for the state oil company, the regulator, to approve that. There is a spectrum of possibilities combining gas-to-shore pipelines, but also liquid natural gas, likely floating, although fixed structures are possible as well offshore. Onshore energy is expensive and complicated, but has scale. I'm going around in a bit wild because there's so many outstanding factors. But I think a likely contender is a floating LNG facility, perhaps combined with some monetization of gas to feed the domestic market. But it's still early days for that.
Okay, another oil and gas question, very briefly. Any comment on the agreement between Suriname and Total on carbon, and do you foresee a joint Guyana-Suriname LNG project? On which side of the border would the plant be?
Yeah, I'm not aware of the carbon agreement. I know what one was discussed. I don't know where that is at the moment. You'd have to ask Total. And I don't speak for Total, obviously. I'm independent. On joint development with Guyana, again, it's a matter of what you see in economies of scale. It goes back to the prior question. There's very many differences between the technical and commercial aspects between Guyana and Suriname. The fiscal structure is very different. The partnerships are different. There's different companies involved in the production sharing contracts, and they all have a say in their own interest. So to combine all of that into a unified scheme, I think is challenging. It's definitely possible, but challenging. And yeah, also the scale. I mean, it is mostly associated gas, although there are some evidence, or there is some evidence of non-associated gas in Suriname in particular. But associated gas means that your first priority is to produce the oil. And the associated gas, so this is what you see happening, rightly so, is that initially the gas is re-injected, but there will come a time when you can start to monetize that. But you will be very much looking after your own facility first, just to make sure that you maximize the recovery of that. I mean, that's just common sense from an oil and gas management point of view. Of course, it's very important then to monetize the resources. And to give you an idea, I mean, the estimates of combined resources between Suriname and Guyana is about 30 TCF. That's a lot. That's equivalent to 5 billion barrels of oil. So it's big. And that's good that it's big, because that means you can pool resources. But whether a joint scheme will come out as the winner, I can't tell you that right now.
Okay, would someone like to answer a question on whether there have been moves to improve Suriname's relations, particularly with the US and also with the Netherlands? Harmen, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, it is actually the present government of Santokhi is very much oriented to the Western countries. The Bouterse government was more oriented towards Cuba, Venezuela, the left-wing crook states, as they are called in the US. But Santokhi is doing his best, and he is getting a lot of attention and confirmation and approval for his policy of macroeconomic restoration, especially by the US. Minister Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, visited Suriname. Oh, it was only 2 hours, but he visited Suriname, had a meeting with the president, the former Dutch Prime Minister Rutte, who is now Secretary General of NATO. He visited Suriname. You can see that this government, the present government of Santokhi, is working very well towards better relation and good relationships with especially the Dutch, but also France, actually also with China, I should say, because China, Rubio warned Suriname that it was too much involved and too dependent on Chinese investments, which makes sense. But China has always been a very good partner with Suriname. So they are friends of almost everybody, but especially the Western countries.
All right. While you're there, can you also answer a question on relations with neighbors, particularly with Guyana and also with Venezuela?
Yeah, the relation with Guyana is always a bit complicated. In daily life, the relationship is very good, but there is still this border conflict, which is already going on since the 1960s, and which the part that is disputed actually belongs to Suriname. That is what Suriname says, and I think historically seen it is like that. But it is something they don't really want to talk about, And in daily life, they are talking about, as was mentioned before, collaboration on working together in the oil industry, building a bridge, but there's no money. Maybe China wants to pay. Santoki said, we will start building the bridge between the two countries over the Corentyne River before the elections. I still have to see that this is going to happen. So, and with French Guyana, the relation is also very good, although less intensive. There were refugees during the civil war in the 80s, refugees, Maroons who fled Suriname to French Guyana. There's a big Surinamese population still living there, and they got their French nationality. France helps with hospitals, with border patrols. The conflict the dispute on the border was solved. So, but with both countries, Suriname has very good relationships.
Okay, would someone like to answer a question on whether or not there is domestic opposition to oil and gas developments, and also what the candidates' approach to energy policy is?
Is that a question for me, or
Whether
I can be very brief. There is some opposition by environmental organizations. Actually, there's maybe it's only one person, but he has some support. In general, the people are looking forward for economic growth. They also make the remark, who is going to take care of the money? And no good solution, no good idea, as far as I know, is brought by any political party. They all say it should be for the next generations. It should be taken care of. But no one has, to my opinion, brought a real good idea that we have to follow the system of Norway. I don't know, maybe other people in this group can.
George, do you want to comment on energy policy?
Well, the way the candidates, I think there are only two political parties who have a little bit of experience in the whole energy thing, and that is the VHP and the NDP.
Yeah.
The party from the vice president isn't taken seriously for obvious reasons. He is a convicted criminal, and seeing the results that will follow, his political party won't make it very far. And they have never contributed very much, next to nothing, to the oil and gas situation. So it's a difficult question to answer.
How about George? What do you think about NPS? Because the leader of the party was the minister of natural resources.
You're right. Sorry. They also have done their share.
But there are no clear plans by none of the parties that you mentioned.
Absolutely not.
There are some positive signals. The sovereign wealth fund that has actually existed for more than a decade, but it's empty because you can't have a sovereign wealth fund and have massive debts together. That doesn't make sense. But the structure of that has existed for quite a few years. And it has been reenacted through Parliament just before the end of last year. So we do have the makings of a sovereign wealth fund. Now, it's called the Savings and Stabilization Fund, and it's savings for the future and stability to fend against commodity price shocks. What really brought Suriname to its knees in the mid-2010s, around 2014-15, that sparked the debt crisis, was the collapse of oil prices and also at the same time the winding down of the bauxite industry. Gold came in place of that, but the oil shock really, really did a lot of damage, followed by COVID 5 years later. That's where we were at the beginning of this government. But the Sovereign Wealth Fund is a good idea, is sensible, and it has actually been enshrined in law now. The other bit that's important is transparency. And there's probably I don't want to make too many comments on that, but there is such a thing as Transparency International, a non-governmental organization. They have a scheme called Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI for short. Many extractive companies support that because it requires an accurate accounting of extractive industry, so oil and mining, particularly the revenues of that within a government. Suriname is a member, but hasn't made much progress. Similar in Guyana. That would probably be a recommendation. Clearly, this is a political decision, not mine to make, but definitely a recommendation. So sovereign wealth fund, transparency, and of course, diversifying the economy. That's also very important. But there are definitely, ways out of this. The method to which it will be picked up, well, we'll see that when the next government takes effect.
I would like to add something to this.
Yeah.
The former CEO of Stage Oil, he already emphasizes for more than 5 years. He said, people, we have to talk in advance what we'll do with the oil income. We have to decide how much will go to the sovereign welfare fund, how much we'll spend on education, healthcare, and so on. Because if you don't do it, and a lot of money comes in, it will bring only conflict, but especially a lot of corruption. So the awareness is there. And the problem with Suriname is, in theory, we all know, we have all great solutions for all our problems. But the practice is always a little bit different. So yes, the current CEO of State Oil said, by example, it doesn't matter, even if we do it very bad, the coming 10 years, 50 years, nothing will happen with us economically wise. And that is a danger that it will be so well with the oil income that we will forget to really diverse the economy. So it's important that the discussion is being emphasized. And by the way, Suriname is the greenest country on earth and also wants to make some income with the carbon credits. And that's also important for the ecotourism. So we can only hope that when the oil money comes in, that people are still, the policymakers will still be focused on diversification of the economy. But what happened the last decades, we can only hope it.
Okay, I'm going to ask the remaining people.
One more little thing. Dave Abeleven, one of the contenders, he corrects me that Mrs. Jennifer Gillen was not elected as party this year, but last year. You know, time flies. In my possession of time, it was this year, but she was elected July 24. Thank you, Dave, for the correction.
Okay, thank you. Harmen, do you want to make any final comments? And then we'll pass around to Willem as well, and then we'll end.
No, I think the most important things have been said. It's very important what will happen after the elections. There are huge possibilities for the country, but you need management, and I really hope that it will be there.
Yeah. Willem, do you have any comments finally?
Now, final comment. I mean, I'm so glad to see so many people join to focus on a country that really wasn't on anybody's radar. As a Dutch person growing up, and I have family here, I was always very aware of happenings. Suriname, moved here 4 years ago. Everybody says, "Are you nuts?" I went independent 2 years ago, and have really enjoyed it massively. I would invite everybody to consider a trip to Suriname. It's absolutely beautiful, friendly, safe, and so and we'll obviously also need a lot of expertise and people willing and able people to come to the country to help with the development. And hopefully, and this is really why I'm so glad to be part of this discussion, hopefully with a government to come that will do the right things for this country, and indeed invest wisely with the proceeds that will be derived from an oil and gas industry in a sustainable manner. So thank you for the opportunity.
I think that's a great way to end.